Hello, my name is Jeremy Higgle, and I am the director and founder of the International Mountain Leadership Institute. This short presentation is to introduce you to our Community First Responder program, which is building up local leaders in the most remote mountain villages in the world. The Community First Responder, or CFR program, was born out of our Wilderness First Aid classes that we teach to outdoor professionals in remote areas. In 2005, we had a group of Western instructors teaching a series of classes to a group of high-altitude porters in the village of Kuplu, Pakistan. As we were preparing for the course, a massive earthquake struck, and its destructive epicenter was about 12 hours' drive to the southwest. In a strange series of events, we found ourselves being flown via helicopter to the most remote mountain villages where the destruction and the casualties were the worst. Around 80,000 people died in that earthquake. Many were injured in a way that left them handicapped. Our team spent 10 days being dropped into these devastated communities. We found people suffering from infected wounds, unreduced fractures, and of course, some had died before we arrived. No one in these communities knew what to do, so they just waited, hoping someone would come to help them. The woman in this photo is a good example. She had a significant laceration on her leg and a compounded fracture on her hand. Neither had been properly cleaned or treated. The result was a life-threatening infection and a permanently handicapped hand. In remote areas where infrastructure is undeveloped, what's the best way to prepare for medical emergencies, either of the day-to-day type or of the major disasters like this earthquake? Because there will never be enough helicopters and there will never be enough professional rescuers. The best answer is to have a team of locally trained volunteers who are trained in the basics of improvised first aid and first response. Here is a photo of one of our local Pakistani mountain guides treating a young girl with cuts to her face. With just the basic first response training he received in our mountaineering course, he was able to help hundreds of people in the earthquake response. As he said, this training is not just for mountaineering, it's for the people like us who live in these villages. So with that revelation, that idea, back in 2005, we set out to develop a program to train teams of first responders in remote mountain communities. That was 2005, and by 2007, we had put together a course that is specifically designed to do just that. We designed the course so that you don't have to be a literate person to be trained. We put together a first aid kit that has only a half dozen items, all of which can be purchased in the local market for less than $5. The checklist on this slide is simply a skill checklist that we go down as we are doing our course, and each of the participants have to demonstrate competency in these skills before they can receive our certificate of training. We call the system the Lend a Hand First Response System. And I'm just going to briefly introduce you to the 5 steps of first response as we teach them in our course. The first step is to stop, look, and think. We stop in an emergency so that we ourselves don't enter into a dangerous situation and get injured. And we do our best to make sure that other bystanders do not rush into danger as well. Then after stopping, we look up, we look down, we look all around. We take a snapshot of the environment, identify the hazards to avoid, and try to get a better idea of what has happened so that we can start to think about how to best help the patient. So we stop, we look, and then we think. We think about the training that we've received. Then what do we do? Next, we need to move the patient to a safe place. If the patient is already in a safe place, we can leave them there. But if the accident scene is dangerous, we have to move them before we can move on to the next step of examination. So we teach special techniques of how to move patients while protecting their injuries so that we don't make the situation worse. Once the patient is in a safe place, it's time to examine the patient. The responder takes about 30 seconds to check for breathing. If a problem is found, it must be immediately addressed. Next, the responder takes about 30 seconds to do a careful blood sweep, looking for serious bleeding. Again, stopping to address any serious bleeding issues that are discovered. And then finally, the responder slows down a bit and does a careful full body check, taking about 5 minutes to look for any other smaller or hidden injuries that need to be treated. And then as we go, we interview the patient to find out more about what has happened. With the examination done, we can now prioritize what we need to do in the next step. The next step is treat the patient. Since this training is designed for people living in remote areas without access to common first aid supplies that we have in the more developed cities, we use improvised techniques based upon what is taught to mountain guides. Our training is done with a first aid kit that has only 6 things. And as I said earlier, each of these items can be purchased in a nearby pharmacy or medical dispensary so that we're not introducing equipment or techniques that they can't reproduce themselves later on. Finally, it's time to evacuate the patient. With the injury stabilized, it's time to get them moving towards the nearest medical care facility. Sometimes this is just 30 minutes down the road, but in remote areas it can take several hours or even days. In any case, we work with the response team in each community to make a custom evacuation plan that fits their situation. Our CFR program has a variety of target audiences. Our first target audience, as we've been talking about, is in remote communities. But in addition, we also teach awareness courses in the schools where high school students and college students are, just to give them the basic ideas about wound cleaning and the simple everyday things that can make them have a healthier life. And then finally, we also work with the local authorities, the first responders who are already there, most of whom in these remote areas have not had proper first aid or first response training. So we do courses with the local police and authorities that are there. So as you can see from here, we trained well over 100 people in 2013 in the remote Himalayan areas. We gave them the full 12-hour training. And more than 100 people were given our awareness courses that we do in schools and in community gatherings. Now, this was an amazing year for us, and we're really looking forward to seeing that grow. Now, usually when you think about medical training, you think about big budgets. But in 2013, the cost was only about $16 per student to complete the entire 12-hour course. And this means that to train a team of 6 first responders in a remote community, it costs less than $100. That is an amazing positive effect for the money invested. Please consider supporting this incredibly important program of our Institute. It may be the best community development program for the money in the world. We sure think so. And for just a donation of $16 a month, you can fund the training of first response teams in 2 remote communities each year. Wow, what an investment. You can either go to our website and use our donation link there with using a PayPal or your credit card, or you can just email us at staff@mountainleadership.org, and we'll be happy to talk with you about ways that you can be involved in our programs. Thank you for your interest.